So this is the next episode of my mini-series on my application process for the Cultural Representative Programme at Walt Disney World. I'm Madison, I'm going out in February 2025, and this video is going to be all about the pre-screen interviews, so the second stage in the interview process. This is obviously my experience. It may be very different for the next application process. It was a few years ago. So by all means, my experience will not be the same as yours. This is just something that I think could be helpful. I know that I really loved watching other people's videos. I found them really comforting and helpful, not necessarily with the information they were giving, but just knowing that they went through something similar that I was going through. But yeah, I'll go through a little bit of a timeline. So I put my application in via Yummy Jobs in January, and I got an email on the 5th of February saying, okay, no, I didn't. So the application I actually sent in was in February. So in my last video, I was wrong. That was the first weekend of February, the first week of February that the applications were open. Anyway, 4 weeks later, the 28th of February, I got a congratulations email from Yummy Job saying, congratulations, we were very impressed with your application and would like to invite you for a pre-screen interview on Monday, March the 11th. This was in person in Epping, Essex, for 15 minutes. And you had no choice. If you want the job, you go on that date. You get to select a time. So I did get an email where I could select a time. It was actually in this email at the bottom, you could select which time you wanted to go. The slots fill up very, very quickly. So I would recommend keeping an eye on your emails. I say that, but also the waiting around and looking at your emails, it can be quite stressful because you can't make an email come quicker just by looking at your emails 100 times a day. But just keep an eye out. I was lucky enough that I wasn't doing anything. I think the email came through quite late one evening. I think it may have even been a weekend. So a lot of the people that I met at the interview said that they were like getting ready for a night out, or were already out like drunk, so they like didn't see it until the next day, so then didn't have any good time slots left. For me, I'm very lucky. I live in Peterborough, so that's only a 45-minute drive to Essex, and many people, so obviously the role is for people from all over the UK, so people were coming from Scotland and they had to fly the night before, get a hotel. That's just what they expect of you. None of that is paid for by them. Basically, they're kind of, I think, trying to weed people out that if they don't care enough, they won't come. So like, if you really want the job, you will make sure you have that day off work, you will make sure that you have the time, you make sure that you have the money to travel there to do the interview, because ultimately that is the kind of commitment you're going to be committing to with the actual role in Florida. Like, you're going to have to pay to get yourself there, you are going to be away from family, you're going to have to quit your job. It's like a little mini test. I don't think that's why they do it, but that's how I saw it. But for me, it was absolutely fine because, as I said, it was quite close, and because I saw the email very quickly, I managed to book a slot that I was happy with, which was, I think, about 1 p.m, because in my head that meant that I could get up at like a normalish time, have breakfast, not rush, drive into Epping. So for that, I paid for a parking spot because Epping is technically, it's on the tube line, so parking isn't amazing there. There is like a big Sainsbury's near, so if you time it well, you could probably get away with parking there because you can get 2 hours for free, and the interview is only 15 minutes. So yeah, but I just paid for a parking spot. I think it was £6 to park on someone's drive, and I was happy with that. So yeah, got up, got ready slowly, had a nice big breakfast, drove to Epping, and then I revised a little bit. So what I did to prepare for this is I wrote questions and answers. I wrote myself potential questions and answers. So I'll give you a couple of examples. you will probably think that I sound crazy, but I wanted to be so prepared for this. I know it's literally just a 15-minute interview in person, but I didn't want to feel stuck at all on anything they spoke to me about, if I'm being honest. So I think I wrote myself 46 questions and answers, and I revised them like the hardest I've revised for anything in my life, which is absolutely ridiculous. I've done a master's, and like, yeah, I've done many educational qualifications, and this is the most I've revised for anything. So I'll read a couple of the questions out. What work experience have I had? How were the skills that I've gained from this experience applied for my chosen role? How will the programme benefit me? What are my hobbies? How would I deal with a difficult situation? How would I deal with working in the heat? How would I greet guests if I was working in the full service restaurant? Why do I want to go to Disney? How would Disney help me with future plans? Have I lived abroad before? What would I do if I got home from a long day at work and someone had eaten my food that I was craving? And basically things like that. And then also one thing that they did ask for, the only thing they asked for, was to bring something that represented your local area, where you're from. So for that, I took Stilton cheese, and then to revise, I wrote a bit of a story about Stilton and the cheese rolling. I also just generally spoke about the history of my city. So I'm from Peterborough. We do have a lot of history, but I mean, it's not the loveliest place in the UK. It's not the worst either, but I did have to do some research and really revise interesting things about my city, so that when she did ask me about Peterborough, I could make it sound exciting and interesting to her, because that's what they were looking for, really, is that if someone, while we're working in America, was going to say, oh, you're from Peterborough, like, tell me about that, like, what's it like there, is it anything like this, and then you can go on a little storytelling rampage. If people want, I can send them all the questions that I revised ahead of the interview. The thing is, the reason I did so many is because I know that each interviewer asks completely different questions to different people. So I knew I wasn't going to get asked 46 questions. I knew I was probably only going to get like 3 or 4 questions, but you don't know what they're going to ask. So for me, so I arrived, there was a little room in the front where like everyone else was sitting who hadn't been interviewed yet. And then they would, Alexis would come in and be like, oh, like, who was next? Like, who was on this time slot? And then she would send them to different rooms. So there was, I think, 3 or 4 people interviewing. And yes, I was sent through to a room with a lovely lady, and she didn't, I think I was honestly asked like 3 or 4 questions. It just felt like a conversation. And I also think that's something they were looking for. They're looking that you can hold a conversation, that you're not really awkward or tense or like stressed. Obviously they know you're going to be a bit nervous and you might stumble on your words or like ask to start again. That's absolutely fine. But they want to see that you're like personable and yeah, charismatic and chatty. But also obviously want to see that you've got the skills. So I know one thing that I was asked was about potentially how it would be living with people. And I just spoke about how I lived with people at university. I've lived with all sorts of different people. I've lived with international people. I've lived with people that I don't like, people that I do like. And yeah, so I have experience in that. And I just answered quite honestly and easily. She also asked about how I would handle the heat. Again, I said that I've been to Florida in the summer for 3 weeks, and that was like going around the parks and like being outside a lot, which I won't be outside that much in the role. So I was like, I think I'll make sure that I'm like hydrated and SPF and wear comfortable shoes, blah blah blah, but I know that I'll be fine. She obviously asked me about Peterborough, so I sold Peterborough to her, and I really think that was it. Yeah, she didn't really ask anything about like working for Disney, what it would do for me, what what I think I would add, blah, blah, blah. Some people may have been asked that by their interviewer. This was just my experience. I found that this was just more of a, how will you handle moving, living abroad? How will you handle living with a group of people you don't know? And can you speak about the United Kingdom with excitement? So I definitely over prepared. You don't need to do that, but obviously maybe it worked in my favour because I just felt very confident when I went in. I think that obviously helps. As I said, they're looking for people with confidence that can speak to anyone. So yeah, that was my experience of the pre-screen interview. If you want me to send the list of my questions, then just leave a comment or message me on Instagram. It's the same handle as this, it's Maddie's Kingdom. I remember finishing and leaving and being like, God, I can't believe that was it. I can't really tell if it went well or not because I didn't really get to say much. But I knew it had gone well, as in I spoke well, we conversed well, it wasn't awkward, it was quite chatty. We spoke about her holidays coming up, things like that. But I did feel a little bit like, I think it went well, but I didn't get to say everything that I'd like to say. But they're obviously just looking for certain things. At the next stage, I will get the date up. On the 21st of March, that I was successful and that I was going to have the in-person interview. So actually that really wasn't a long wait, that was a week. So that was the shortest wait out of everything in this whole process, which was great. So yeah, I interviewed on the 11th of March and then I got an email on the 21st saying I was successful and that I was going to have an interview in person in Hammersmith. So quickly, I did have to print out a version of my CV and a few pictures of myself to give to them. So obviously they're going through so many people a day, and it's random who you end up with. I imagine it's so they can make a few notes on your CV and they can look at your pictures and be like, okay, when they then speak later, they're like, oh yes, she was blah, 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 blah. I think yes, no, I imagine that's what it's for. Yeah, on the 21st of March, we would like to thank you for your time. This sent like shivers down my spine because the way it was worded, the first line is, we would like to thank you for your time, for taking the time and making the effort to travel to Epping earlier this month. To me, that first sentence is giving, sorry, unlucky hun, like you didn't get it. But thankfully it was, we very much appreciate the investment you made. I mean, that first sentence there as well, it's like, thank you, but sorry. Yeah, so it must be the first two paragraphs they send to everyone maybe, because it is just kind of all like, thank you so much for your like time and your enthusiasm, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, congratulations, we're delighted to let you know that we very much enjoyed meeting you and you have been selected for final interviews at Disney's London headquarters at the end of April. And then there's a list of instructions. So we were then getting an email from Doc, which is the Disney's online portal thing, careers portal, and then we had to complete like steps to kind of register and almost like apply again. It was a little stressful because it felt like I had to submit my cover letter and my CV again, basically all in the proper careers portal for Disney, because at this point it's all been through Yummy Jobs, it's not been officially through Disney, but it's basically just so they have it on their records. Like they're not looking at them and being like, actually no, we don't want to speak to her. Like they're trusting Yummy Jobs, it's just so it's on their system. But yes, we had to sign up for Doc, we had to add in our email address, our phone number, our passport information, and yeah, our CV, our cover letter, and I think that was it. And so the email then must have come from Doc to select a date and time. I think there was 3 days. I know that how it works is, so you have to be there for 8:45 because they do a presentation to everyone interviewing that day at 9. And then if your interview's in the afternoon, you just kind of have to go off for a bit and then come back. So whether you like it or not, whether you've booked an afternoon appointment or not, you have to be there for that early time. So again, I was quite lucky. I was on my phone when I got the email that was asking us to select our date and time. I booked 10 a.m. I think, because I think you could book maybe 9:45. I think I booked, yeah, maybe 10 or 10:30, so that I knew I wouldn't have to leave, because that would stress me out if I had to be in and then watch them do a presentation and then have to go and wander around Hammersmith for a few hours. I would get stressed and work myself up. So I was lucky enough that I could book one of the first interviews. I didn't do the very first because I was like, maybe I'll need a wee, maybe I'll want a drink, or maybe I want to have a quick look through my interview questions again, whatever. So yeah, I'm not going to go into much more further details because I'll do that in the next video. But yes, if you get to this stage, amazing, congratulations. Keep an eye on your emails so that you can get the earlier slot, because it was just very handy not having to leave, and then it was all over before I think midday. But yes, come back for the next video in the series, which will be about the in-person interview. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck, and if you have any questions, again, just put them in the comments or DM me.